What if a single decision you make today could quietly determine whether you live comfortably in the future or struggle financially for decades? Most people assume that wealth depends on big factors, an elite education, a high-paying job, or a lucky break. But in reality, the foundation of financial success is often built on something far less dramatic. It comes down to a simple, almost unnoticeable habit: consistently setting aside a small amount of money and allowing it to grow over time. The reason this idea is so powerful is also the reason it is so often ignored. It doesn't feel urgent, it doesn't feel exciting, and it certainly doesn't promise instant results. In a world that celebrates quick wins and overnight success, a slow and steady approach can seem insignificant, but that perception is exactly what causes most people to miss it. Over time, small actions repeated consistently begin to compound. A modest monthly contribution, when paired with patience and discipline, can evolve into something far greater than most people expect. The real challenge is not the amount of money required, but the willingness to begin and the discipline to continue. This is where the true divide begins, not between the rich and the poor, but between those who act early and those who delay. Beneath the surface of modern life lies a financial reality that is far more fragile than it appears. Many people seem to be doing well, have stable jobs, decent incomes, and lifestyles that look comfortable from the outside. Yet, when faced with even a small financial emergency, the illusion quickly breaks down. A significant number of individuals cannot access even a modest amount of emergency funds without stress. A car repair, a medical bill, or an unexpected expense can disrupt their entire financial stability. This isn't limited to those with low incomes. It includes people who are educated, employed, and seemingly secure. The issue is not always a lack of income, but rather a lack of accumulation. Most people operate within a repetitive cycle. They earn money, spend it, and then start over again. There is little left over to build a financial cushion, let alone long-term wealth. Over time, this pattern becomes normalized. As long as the bills are paid and life continues as usual, the absence of savings or investments doesn't feel urgent, until it suddenly is. What makes this situation more concerning is how invisible it can be. From the outside, everything looks fine. But internally, there is no margin for error, no buffer against uncertainty, and no system in place to create future security. This is the quiet trap that keeps people stuck, not because they lack the ability to earn, but because they never shift from consumption to accumulation. In today's world, it has become increasingly difficult to distinguish between real wealth and the appearance of wealth. Social norms and media have reshaped how success looks, often equating it with visible consumption rather than financial stability. People drive nice cars, wear fashionable clothes, and own the latest devices. These signals create the impression of prosperity. However, in many cases, these lifestyles are supported not by strong financial foundations, but by continuous spending and, sometimes, debt. This creates a dangerous illusion. When individuals measure success based on what they can display, they are more likely to prioritize short-term satisfaction over long-term security. Money flows outward to maintain an image, rather than being directed inward to build assets. Over time, this habit prevents the accumulation of real wealth. True financial strength is not always visible. It exists in savings accounts, investment portfolios, and the ability to handle unexpected events without disruption. It is quiet, often unnoticed, and rarely showcased. The problem is that many people never realize the difference. They believe they are progressing because their lifestyle improves, when in reality, their financial position remains unchanged or even weakens. Understanding this distinction is critical, because until someone separates appearance from reality, they will continue to chase a version of success that offers no lasting security. Despite how complex financial advice often sounds, the solution to building long-term wealth can be surprisingly simple. It does not require advanced knowledge, large amounts of capital, or access to exclusive opportunities. Instead, it begins with a small, consistent action that almost anyone can take. Setting aside a fixed amount of money each month, such as $100, and committing to that habit over time can create a powerful foundation for financial growth. At first glance, this amount may seem insignificant. For some, it feels too small to matter. For others, it may seem difficult to spare. But both perspectives overlook the real purpose of this strategy. The value is not in the size of the contribution, but in the consistency behind it. By choosing to redirect a portion of your money away from consumption and toward investment, you begin to shift your financial behavior. You become more aware of where your money goes. You start making more intentional decisions. Over time, this shift builds discipline, and discipline creates momentum. This approach is not designed to deliver immediate results. It is designed to establish a system, one that works quietly in the background, growing stronger with time. The simplicity of it is what makes it effective, but also what causes many people to underestimate it. In reality, the people who succeed financially are often not those who take the biggest risks, but those who apply simple principles consistently over long periods. And it all starts with a single decision to begin. One of the most common misconceptions about wealth is that it is primarily determined by how much money a person earns. While income certainly plays a role, it is not the deciding factor. The true difference lies in how money is managed, not how much of it comes in. A monthly amount like $100 is not large, yet many people struggle to save even that consistently. This is not always because they lack the financial ability, but because saving is not prioritized. Money is often spent automatically on small, frequent purchases that feel insignificant in the moment but accumulate over time. Dining out a few extra times, making impulse purchases, or maintaining subscriptions that are rarely used, these habits quietly drain resources. Individually, each expense seems harmless. Collectively, they prevent meaningful financial progress. The key question, then, is not whether someone has enough money to save, but whether they are willing to redirect their spending. Shifting even a small portion of income from consumption to investment requires awareness and intentionality. This is where behavior becomes critical. People who build wealth tend to develop habits that support long-term growth. They track their spending, evaluate their choices, and make adjustments when necessary. They understand that every financial decision carries an opportunity cost. Choosing one option means giving up another. In contrast, those who remain stuck often operate on autopilot. Their financial decisions are reactive rather than deliberate, driven by convenience or immediate desire rather than long-term goals. Over time, these differences in behavior create dramatically different outcomes, not because one group earns significantly more, but because one group consistently makes choices that allow their money to grow. Once the importance of saving consistently becomes clear, the next question is simple. Where does the $100 come from? For most people, the answer can be found through two practical approaches: reducing expenses or increasing income. The most effective strategy often combines both. The first approach is to examine and optimize your current spending. Many expenses occur automatically each month without much attention. These include bills for services such as internet, mobile plans, insurance, and various subscriptions. Over time, these costs can drift higher than necessary simply because they are never reviewed. By taking the time to reassess these recurring payments, it is often possible to reduce them significantly. Switching providers, negotiating rates, or eliminating services that are rarely used can quickly free up extra money. In many cases, A few small adjustments are enough to recover $50 to $100 per month without drastically changing your lifestyle. Beyond fixed costs, daily spending habits also offer opportunities for improvement. Being more mindful about how often you eat out, what you purchase, and how you shop can lead to meaningful savings. The goal is not extreme restriction, but strategic adjustment, making changes that are sustainable over the long term. The second approach is to increase your income. In today's environment, there are more opportunities than ever to earn additional money outside of a primary job. This could involve freelance work, part-time roles, or small side projects based on existing skills. Earning an extra $100 per month may sound challenging at first, but when broken down, it often requires only a small amount of additional effort. A few hours of focused work each week can be enough to reach that goal. Ultimately, it does not matter which path you choose. What matters is taking action. Whether you reduce expenses, increase income, or combine both, the objective remains the same. Create a consistent flow of money that can be redirected toward building your future. The moment you begin investing that $100 each month, something fundamentally changes. Your money is no longer just a tool for spending. It becomes a resource that can generate more money on its own. At first, the results may seem modest. Over a period of 10 years, contributing $100 per month adds up to $12,000. With steady investment returns, that amount can grow to around $18,000. The additional $6,000 represents earnings generated not by extra work, but by the money itself. While this growth may not appear life-changing at first glance, it marks the beginning of a much more powerful process. What you are seeing is not the full potential, but the early stage of a system that strengthens over time. The key shift here is understanding that income no longer depends solely on your effort. Instead of trading time for money in a linear way, you begin to build a system where your existing resources contribute to future gains. This transition, from active income to partially passive growth, is one of the most important turning points in personal finance. It introduces a new dynamic. Your financial progress is no longer limited by how many hours you can work. As you continue contributing and allowing your investments to grow, this effect becomes more noticeable. The gains start to build on themselves, creating a cycle where each period of growth increases the potential for the next. What begins as a small monthly habit gradually evolves into a system that operates continuously, even when you are not actively involved. And this is where the real transformation begins. What makes this strategy truly powerful is not the initial contribution, but the way growth builds upon itself over time. This process is known as compound growth, and it is the force that transforms small, consistent investments into substantial long-term wealth. In the early years, progress can feel slow. The returns generated by your investments may appear small compared to the effort it takes to set money aside each month. This is the stage where many people lose patience, believing that the results are not worth it. However, this perspective overlooks how compounding actually works. As your investment balance increases, the returns are calculated on a larger and larger base. This means that each period of growth contributes more than the last. What once produced modest gains begins to generate increasingly significant results. Over a long period, such as a 40-year career, the impact becomes dramatic. A total contribution of $48,000, invested consistently over time, can grow into more than $350,000 under reasonable market conditions. The majority of that final amount does not come from the money you personally contributed, but from the growth accumulated along the way. This is the defining characteristic of compound growth. Your money earns returns, and then those returns begin to earn returns as well. At a certain point, the growth accelerates in a way that feels almost disproportionate to the effort invested. This is not due to luck or sudden change, but the natural outcome of a process that has been building quietly for years. Understanding this principle changes how you view both time and money. It becomes clear that the earlier you begin, the more opportunity your investments have to compound. Delaying even a few years can significantly reduce the final outcome, not because of missed contributions, but because of lost growth on those contributions. In the end, compound growth rewards patience and consistency above all else. It does not require perfect timing or exceptional skill, only the willingness to stay committed long enough for the process to fully unfold. As the effects of compound growth become clearer, one principle stands above all others. Time matters more than almost anything else. While money can be earned, saved, or even lost and regained, time is the one resource that cannot be replaced. Many people delay investing because they believe they can start later, when they earn more or feel more financially stable. On the surface, this seems reasonable. However, what is often overlooked is the cost of waiting. Starting 10 years earlier does not simply mean contributing for 10 additional years. It means giving every dollar you invest an extra decade to grow, multiply, and compound. This difference can lead to dramatically larger outcomes over the long term. For example, someone who begins investing at age 25 has a significant advantage over someone who starts at 35, even if the latter contributes more money each month. The early start allows compound growth to work for a longer period, creating momentum that becomes increasingly difficult to catch up with. This is why time is often described as the most powerful multiplier in investing. The longer your money remains invested, the greater its potential to grow, not in a straight line but at an accelerating rate. Understanding this shifts your perspective. Instead of asking how much you can invest, the more important question becomes how soon you can begin. Even a small amount invested early can outperform larger amounts invested later, simply because it has more time to compound. Every month you delay is a missed opportunity for growth that cannot be recovered. This is not meant to create urgency out of fear, but to highlight the value of taking action sooner rather than later. In the context of long-term investing, starting early is not just an advantage. It is often the factor that makes the biggest difference. While the mathematics of investing are relatively straightforward, the real challenge lies in human behavior. Building wealth is not just a financial process, it is a psychological one. At its core, it requires a continuous choice between present desires and future benefits. Every month you are faced with a decision. You can invest your $100 as planned, or you can spend it on something that provides immediate satisfaction. This choice may seem small in isolation, but repeated over time, it shapes your entire financial trajectory. Modern society makes this decision even more difficult. We are constantly exposed to messages that encourage spending. Advertisements, social media, and cultural norms all promote the idea that enjoyment should happen now. Convenience and instant gratification are prioritized, making it easy to justify small, impulsive purchases. This creates an environment where delaying gratification feels unnatural, even though it is essential for long-term success. The challenge is not that people don't understand the benefits of saving and investing. It is that they are surrounded by incentives to do the opposite. Over time, giving in to short-term desires becomes a habit, reinforcing a cycle that prevents wealth from being built. Those who succeed financially learn to manage this internal conflict. They do not eliminate the desire for immediate rewards, but they control it. They recognize that each financial decision carries a trade-off, and they consciously choose options that support their long-term goals. One effective way to reduce this psychological burden is to remove the need for repeated decisions. Instead of relying on willpower every month, Successful investors create systems that make investing automatic. By doing so, they limit the influence of emotion and make consistency easier to maintain. In the end, the ability to build wealth is less about intelligence or opportunity, and more about the capacity to consistently choose the future over the present. Relying on motivation or willpower alone is rarely enough to sustain long-term financial habits. Even the most disciplined individuals can struggle when faced with repeated decisions, unexpected expenses, or emotional impulses. This is why one of the most effective strategies for consistent investing is automation. Instead of deciding each month whether to invest, successful individuals remove the decision entirely. They set up automatic transfers that move money into their investment accounts as soon as income is received. In this way, investing becomes a fixed obligation, similar to paying rent or a utility bill, rather than a choice that can be postponed. This approach offers several important advantages. First, it reduces friction when the process is automatic. There is no need to think, plan, or negotiate with yourself. The action happens consistently, regardless of mood or external circumstances. Second, it protects you from impulsive behavior. Money that is automatically invested is no longer easily available to spend. This creates a natural barrier against unnecessary consumption and reinforces long-term priorities. Third, it builds reliability. Over time, small, automated contributions accumulate into meaningful sums without requiring continuous effort. What might feel insignificant in a single month becomes powerful through repetition. Automation also shifts your identity. Instead of someone who tries to save, you become someone who consistently invests. This subtle change reinforces confidence and strengthens your commitment to long-term financial growth. By transforming discipline into a system, you reduce the role of emotion and increase the likelihood of success. The goal is not to make perfect decisions every time, but to create an environment where the right decision happens by default. And once this system is in place, consistency becomes much easier to maintain. In the beginning, the results of consistent investing can feel underwhelming. The growth is slow, the numbers are small, and the progress may seem almost invisible. This early phase is where many people lose interest or question whether their efforts are worthwhile. However, what appears insignificant at first is actually the foundation of something much larger. As you continue to invest month after month, your total balance gradually increases. With a larger base, each percentage gain begins to produce more noticeable results. Over time, the growth starts to accelerate, not because your strategy has changed, but because the system itself is gaining momentum. This is often compared to a snowball rolling downhill. At the top of the hill, the snowball is small and moves slowly, but as it rolls, it collects more snow, grows in size, and gains speed. Eventually, it becomes powerful enough that its growth seems almost effortless. The same principle applies to investing. The critical point is that this acceleration does not happen immediately. It requires patience during the early stages, when progress feels minimal. Those who stop too soon never experience the phase where growth becomes substantial and self-reinforcing. As your investments grow, something else begins to change: your perception. You start to notice the increases in your account, even if they are still modest. These visible signs of progress create motivation, making it easier to stay committed. Over time, this momentum builds not only in your finances, but also in your behavior. You become more engaged, more aware, and more intentional with your money. The process begins to feed itself. Growth encourages consistency, and consistency drives further growth. What started as a small, disciplined habit evolves into a system that gains strength with every passing month. And once that momentum is established, maintaining it becomes far easier than starting from scratch. As you continue investing and begin to witness steady growth, something deeper starts to change, not just in your finances, but in your mindset. You no longer see money purely as something to spend. Instead, you begin to recognize it as a tool that can generate future value. This shift in perspective is subtle at first, but incredibly powerful. Every financial decision starts to carry more weight. When you consider spending $100, you no longer see it as just a simple purchase. You begin to think about what that $100 could become if invested over time. It is no longer just a cost. It represents a lost opportunity for future growth. This is known as understanding the opportunity cost of money. With this awareness, your behavior naturally begins to change. You don't necessarily stop spending or enjoying life, but your decisions become more intentional. You start distinguishing more clearly between what truly adds value to your life and what simply provides temporary satisfaction. This mindset is one of the defining characteristics of financially successful individuals. They are not always more disciplined or more intelligent, but they think differently about the relationship between money and time. They understand that every dollar has potential beyond its present use. Over time, this way of thinking influences not just small daily choices, but larger decisions as well. You may begin to prioritize investments over lifestyle upgrades, or channel extra income toward assets instead of consumption. This does not mean eliminating enjoyment. It means aligning your financial choices with long-term goals. Once this shift takes place, building wealth becomes less about forcing yourself to save and more about naturally choosing actions that support your future. And that is when consistency becomes sustainable, not just possible. As your investments continue to grow, there comes a point where the impact becomes tangible. What once felt like a slow and distant process begins to show real, measurable results. Your account balance reaches levels where the growth itself becomes noticeable, even over shorter periods of time. At around $50,000, you may start to see monthly fluctuations that reflect meaningful gains or losses. At $100,000, the growth during strong market periods can become substantial enough to rival a portion of your earned income. As the balance increases further, the role of your investments begins to shift. They are no longer just a supplement. They start to become a significant source of financial progress. This is the stage where the concept of financial independence begins to take shape. Financial independence does not necessarily mean never working again. Rather, it means having enough financial resources that your decisions are no longer dictated solely by the need to earn a paycheck. With a sufficiently large investment base, your money begins to generate returns that can support part, or eventually all, of your living expenses. This creates flexibility. You gain the ability to make choices based on preference rather than necessity. You may choose to pursue work that is more meaningful, even if it pays less. You may take calculated risks, such as starting a business or changing careers, without the same level of financial pressure. Opportunities that once seemed too risky become accessible. This transformation does not happen overnight. It is the result of years of consistent effort and disciplined investing. But once it begins, it changes your relationship with money entirely. Instead of working only for money, your money begins working for you in a meaningful way. And that is the foundation upon which true financial independence is built. As your investment portfolio reaches larger milestones, a noticeable shift begins to occur. Growth is no longer subtle or occasional. It becomes consistent, visible, and increasingly impactful. This stage is often referred to as the acceleration phase. At this point, your investments are generating returns that feel significant on their own. Market gains over a single month or year can equal, or even exceed, the amount you are personally contributing. What once required effort is now being supplemented and gradually replaced by the performance of your assets. This creates a powerful psychological effect. Seeing your money grow without additional labor changes how you think about earning and investing. Instead of relying solely on income from work, you begin to recognize the potential of capital. Your focus naturally shifts toward expanding your investments because you can clearly see the results they produce. As a result, many people become more motivated to increase their contributions. They may look for ways to earn more, reduce unnecessary expenses, or redirect unexpected income, such as bonuses or tax refunds, into their investment accounts. The process becomes self-reinforcing. Growth drives motivation, and motivation leads to increased investment, which in turn accelerates growth even further. This is also the stage where long-term discipline becomes easier to maintain. The early phase required patience without much visible reward. Now, the rewards are clear and frequent, making it easier to stay committed. Importantly, this acceleration is not due to a change in strategy. It is the natural outcome of consistency over time. The same simple habit, investing regularly, has now compounded to a level where its effects are far more powerful. For many, this is the moment when investing shifts from being a routine to becoming a priority, not because it requires more effort, but because its impact has become undeniable. Despite how straightforward this strategy may seem, many people fail to achieve its full benefits, not because the method does not work, but because of a few common mistakes that interrupt the process before it has time to deliver meaningful results. The first mistake is never starting. Some individuals wait for the perfect moment, when they have more money, more knowledge, or better market conditions. They believe that starting small is not worthwhile, so they delay taking action. Unfortunately, this delay often becomes indefinite, and the opportunity for early growth is lost. The second mistake is giving up too soon. Investing over the long term inevitably involves periods of uncertainty. Markets rise and fall, and there will be times when your portfolio decreases in value. For those who are unprepared, these downturns can feel like failure. As a result, they stop investing or withdraw their money at the worst possible time. However, market fluctuations are not a flaw in the system. They are a natural part of it. Over extended periods, these ups and downs tend to balance out, with long-term trends historically favoring patient investors. Those who succeed understand this. They do not expect constant growth, and they do not react emotionally to short-term changes. Instead, they remain consistent, continuing to invest regardless of temporary market conditions. Another common mistake is focusing too much on short-term results. When people evaluate their progress over weeks or months, the impact of compounding is barely visible. This can lead to frustration and doubt. But this strategy is not designed for short-term validation. It is built for long-term transformation. Avoiding these mistakes does not require exceptional skill. It requires awareness, patience, and a clear understanding of the process. By starting early, staying consistent, and maintaining a long-term perspective, you greatly increase your chances of success. In the end, the difference is not in the complexity of the strategy, but in the ability to follow it through. At first, the idea of investing $100 per month may seem like a fixed target, something to maintain indefinitely. But in reality, the number itself is not the ultimate objective. It is simply a starting point. The true goal is to build a habit. By committing to a consistent monthly investment, you are training yourself to prioritize long-term growth over short-term consumption. You are developing a system of behavior that, once established, becomes easier to maintain and expand. Over time, most people naturally begin to increase their contributions. As income grows, expenses are optimized, or financial awareness improves, the initial $100 often evolves into larger amounts. What began as a small commitment becomes the foundation for more significant progress. This is where the strategy reveals its full strength. It is not limited by the starting amount. It is scalable. The habit you build at $100 per month can be applied just as effectively at $200, $500, or even higher levels. More importantly, the habit influences other areas of your financial life. You may become more intentional with spending, more proactive in seeking better opportunities, and more focused on long-term outcomes. These changes compound alongside your investments, accelerating your overall progress. The key insight is that consistency creates identity. When you repeatedly act in a certain way, it becomes part of who you are. You are no longer someone who tries to invest. You are someone who invests regularly. Once this identity is established, growth becomes a natural extension of your behavior, not something that requires constant effort or motivation. In the end, the amount you start with matters far less than the habit you build, because it is that habit that determines whether wealth building becomes temporary or inevitable. When viewed from the outside, this entire approach may seem almost too simple to be effective. There are no complex techniques, no advanced financial instruments, and no need for constant decision-making. It is built on a single principle: invest consistently over time and allow compound growth to do the work. Because of its simplicity, many people underestimate it. They assume that meaningful wealth must come from something more sophisticated or dramatic. As a result, they search for faster, more exciting methods, often exposing themselves to unnecessary risk or inconsistency. However, history has shown that this steady approach has created more long-term financial success than most alternatives. It does not rely on perfect timing. It does not require predicting market movements. It does not depend on luck. Instead, it leverages time, discipline, and the natural growth of investments. The individuals who benefit most from this strategy are not necessarily the ones who start with the most money, but those who remain consistent for the longest period. While others chase short-term gains or abandon their plans during difficult periods, they continue forward with a clear and stable approach. Over the years, this consistency compounds, not just financially but behaviorally. Each contribution reinforces the habit. Each period of growth strengthens confidence, and each milestone reached makes the process easier to continue. Eventually, what began as a small monthly action evolves into a powerful financial system, one that operates with minimal effort but produces meaningful results. The outcome is not sudden or dramatic. It is gradual, reliable, and lasting. And that is precisely what makes it so valuable.